Avery Lane was a 21-year-old trans student looking for a fresh start. Dr. Marcus Halwell was a respected college professor with a picture-perfect life. Behind closed doors, their secret affair was unraveling fast. And by the time the truth came to light, one of them was dead, and the other was on trial for murder. In the fall of 2021, 21-year-old Avery Lane arrived at Briarwood College hoping for a fresh start. The small liberal arts school, tucked away in a quiet corner of Massachusetts, was known for its progressive values and inclusive environment, qualities Avery found comforting. Having recently come out as a transgender man, he was determined to live authentically and focus on his dreams of becoming an investigative journalist. His past had been marked by rejection, whispers, and discomfort in his own skin, but Briarwood represented a chance to rewrite that narrative. With a small suitcase and an oversized backpack filled with books, Avery stepped onto campus, believing this could finally be the place where he belonged. Avery was a serious student. He rarely partied and preferred spending time in the library or writing for the student-run online magazine. He covered campus events, exposed administrative oversights, and earned a reputation for asking tough questions. Many students admired him, even if he kept most people at arm's length. Faculty praised his writing, especially one professor in particular, Dr. Marcus Halwell. Dr. Halwell was a 38-year-old ethics professor with a sleek wardrobe, salt and pepper hair, and a voice made for lectures. He'd been at Briarwood for nearly a decade and was one of the most popular figures on campus. His classes were always full, his office hours booked solid. Married with 2 young children and a spouse who worked at a local nonprofit, Dr. Halwell projected the image of a dedicated family man and academic. But to those who paid closer attention, there were subtle cracks in that image. Some students whispered that he played favorites. Others noticed how he lingered too long during one-on-one sessions or grew defensive when questioned about personal matters. Avery first met Dr. Halwell in an introductory course on moral philosophy. His sharp mind and inquisitive nature made an impression. After submitting a critical essay on utilitarianism and its application in modern journalism, Avery was invited to discuss his ideas in Halwell's office. It was there that the connection began. What seemed like a purely academic mentorship at first slowly evolved into something far more personal. What no one knew was that those meetings stretched into hours, often behind closed doors. Halwell offered Avery reading lists not found on any syllabus. He praised Avery's intelligence, his courage, his clarity of thought. Avery, in turn, felt seen in a way he hadn't before. He confided in Halwell about his transition, about feeling isolated even in supposedly inclusive spaces. Halwell listened with an attentiveness that felt like safety. But what began as trust quietly morphed into dependence. By October, Avery started spending more time near Halwell's office. He missed club meetings. He declined social invitations. Some students noticed the change but assumed he was simply overwhelmed with work. One of his suite mates casually mentioned seeing Avery and Halwell together late one evening, walking across campus in deep conversation. But at Briarwood, where professors were regarded almost as untouchable intellectual giants, few questioned what those relationships looked like behind closed doors. It would be months before the truth surfaced, and by then, the damage was irreversible. Avery Lane thought Briarwood would be his sanctuary. Instead, it became the backdrop for a secret he couldn't escape, a secret that would cost him everything. By early winter, what had started as mentorship between Avery Lane and Dr. Marcus Halwell had transformed into a secret affair layered with emotional complexity and silent danger. The power imbalance was clear, but the lines had blurred beyond recognition. Their meetings were no longer confined to office hours or academic discussions. They began meeting off campus, sometimes at secluded coffee shops or in Halwell's car parked in dark corners of the faculty lot. It was always discreet, always quiet, always laced with the kind of tension that comes from forbidden attachment. Avery, having rarely experienced emotional intimacy or romantic validation, became deeply invested. To him, Halwell wasn't just a professor. He was a symbol of approval, a gatekeeper to a world Avery had struggled to feel included in. Halwell made promises in hushed tones, how he cared deeply, how his marriage was failing, how he needed time but was considering leaving his wife. He fed Avery just enough hope to keep him tethered, all while maintaining the illusion of control. What Avery didn't see, or perhaps didn't want to admit, was that Halwell had no intention of making anything public. He lived a carefully curated life. At home, he was the doting father. On campus, he was the intellectual. And in secret, he was a man feeding off the power and vulnerability of a younger student who had put his trust in the wrong person. As the affair intensified, so did the volatility. Avery, once quiet and measured, became restless. He grew tired of being hidden, tired of making excuses, tired of receiving mixed signals. He began saving screenshots of texts and recording voice memos after their meetings, not out of malice, but out of fear that if things collapsed, no one would believe him. Halwell's tone had shifted. The once warm emails were now sprinkled with frustration and passive-aggressive remarks. He accused Avery of being clingy, of misunderstanding what this was. But Avery knew. He had the messages, the voice notes, the receipts. In late January, Avery confided in a high school friend over a video call. He revealed everything: how the relationship began, how it evolved, and how trapped he felt. The friend was alarmed and advised Avery to cut all contact, even suggesting going to the college administration. Avery listened but hesitated. He feared the fallout. He feared being blamed, being disbelieved, being told he had seduced a respected professor for attention. Still, something had changed in him. He started documenting everything more carefully. He drafted a statement detailing the relationship, naming dates, locations, and threats. He stored backups in cloud accounts and on flash drives. He was preparing for a confrontation, not just with Halwell, but with the institution that allowed someone like him to be placed in harm's way without recourse. By mid-February, Halwell seemed to sense the shift. He became more controlling, more agitated. He warned Avery not to ruin lives and accused him of manipulation. The messages turned darker. One, found later in Avery's email archive, simply read, "Some things are better left unsaid. You don't want to start a war you can't win." What Avery didn't realize was how far Halwell was willing to go to protect the life he'd built. The relationship had never been about love. It had always been about control. And when control began to slip, Halwell began to plan. On the morning of March 3rd, Avery Lane left his dorm just after 8:15 a.m. His roommate recalled that he looked calm but distant, carrying a small messenger bag and wearing the same gray hoodie he often wore on stressful days. He mentioned something vague about having a meeting with a faculty member but didn't name who. It was the last time anyone saw him alive. By late afternoon, Avery had not returned. He missed his journalism seminar and failed to respond to messages from his editor at the campus paper. That night, he didn't show up for a study group meeting he had helped organize. His phone rang but went to voicemail, which wasn't unusual at first. Avery sometimes unplugged when he was overwhelmed. But when he didn't come home by the following morning, concern turned to alarm. His roommate contacted campus security, and soon Avery's parents, who lived several states away, were alerted. They immediately drove up to Briarwood, panicked and desperate. Within 24 hours, a missing persons report was filed with the local police. Avery's dorm room was searched. His laptop had been wiped clean. His phone was unreachable. His car remained untouched in the student parking lot. Investigators began piecing together his last known movements. Security cameras captured Avery exiting the dorm, walking past the student union, and then disappearing from view near the edge of campus. One blurry camera feed from a nearby street showed a dark SUV pulling up shortly after. Friends and classmates were interviewed. A few mentioned that Avery had been anxious in recent weeks, distracted and irritable. One student recalled Avery saying he was done being someone's secret. Another mentioned a faculty member he seemed unusually close to, though they didn't know the professor's name. When authorities pulled data from Avery's cloud backups, more troubling information surfaced. Police discovered dozens of deleted messages and voicemails recovered from the cloud. Many were from Dr. Marcus Halwell. The tone varied. Some messages were pleading, emotional, even affectionate. Others were cold and aggressive, warning Avery to think carefully before making any decisions. One text, sent just days before Avery disappeared, stood out. "If you try to take me down, I promise you it won't end well for either of us." When investigators visited Dr. Halwell, he confirmed that he knew Avery, but downplayed their relationship as strictly academic. He claimed he hadn't spoken to Avery in weeks, but when detectives requested access to his phone and devices, Halwell refused without a warrant. That raised a red flag. Behind the scenes, Avery's parents were growing increasingly vocal. They contacted the media, accusing the school of dragging its feet and protecting its own. Students organized candlelight vigils and circulated flyers with Avery's photo, demanding answers. The pressure mounted as the days turned into weeks. Then, nearly 3 weeks after his disappearance, a pair of hikers in a wooded marsh 10 miles outside of town stumbled upon something strange. Wrapped tightly in a blue tarp and half submerged in water was a body. Weighted down with bricks and rope, it was badly decomposed. Authorities were called immediately. Dental records later confirmed what many feared. The body was Avery Lane. The discovery of Avery Lane's body sent shockwaves through the Briarwood community. News vans parked outside the college gates. Students gathered in silence as grief replaced the once simmering speculation. The autopsy report, released days later, confirmed what many already suspected. Avery had been murdered. His body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the head and ligature marks around the neck, indicating he had been strangled. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting he may have been caught off guard, possibly even by someone he trusted. Investigators immediately intensified their focus on Dr. Marcus Halwell. They had already recovered threatening messages from him in Avery's deleted texts, and now the physical evidence pushed them to dig deeper. Surveillance footage, financial records, and digital communication were meticulously reviewed. A breakthrough came when police obtained a warrant to search Halwell's lake house, a property he seldom used and hadn't mentioned during prior interviews. What they found inside shifted the investigation from suspicion to certainty. In a locked storage closet in the basement, detectives found a blood-stained area rug, traces of which matched Avery's DNA. Nearby was a half-empty bottle of industrial-strength cleaner and gloves. But the most damning evidence was tucked inside an old filing cabinet. A flash drive containing copies of emails, screenshots of conversations, and a voice recording of an argument between Halwell and Avery. The voice was unmistakably Halwell's, growing increasingly aggressive as Avery demanded to go public. Also hidden in a freezer was Avery's missing journal, wrapped in a plastic bag. Its entries documented the affair in detail: dates, locations, conversations. The journal was methodical and heartbreakingly honest, describing the emotional toll the relationship had taken on him. One entry read, "He tells me he loves me, but only when no one else is watching. I'm tired of being his secret. I'm tired of being scared." When confronted with the evidence, Halwell's story began to unravel. He admitted to meeting Avery the day he disappeared, but claimed it was just to clear the air. He said things got heated, that Avery became emotional, and that the situation spiraled. But his version of events didn't match the physical evidence or the premeditated measures used to dispose of the body. The weight of the forensic and digital trail left little room for doubt. Halwell was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and abuse of authority. As news of the arrest broke, Briarwood College faced a storm of criticism. Students staged protests, demanding accountability from the administration. Questions were raised about how much the university knew and whether it had turned a blind eye to inappropriate behavior. A group of alumni released an open letter calling for a full investigation into faculty-student boundaries. The trial was scheduled to begin later that year, but the damage to the community was already done. Parents questioned their children's safety. LGBTQ+ students expressed anger over how quietly their concerns had been dismissed. In hushed corners of the campus, students spoke about Avery not just as a victim, but as a symbol of what happens when institutions prioritize reputation over protection. As the trial date approached, one truth became impossible to ignore. Avery Lane had warned people. He had tried to be heard. And yet, silence had paved the way for tragedy. The trial of Dr. Marcus Halwell began 6 months after Avery Lane's body was discovered. The courtroom was packed each day with journalists, students, activists, and Avery's grieving family. On the surface, the case seemed straightforward. The forensic evidence, the threatening messages, the journal entries, and the discovery of Avery's body all pointed in one direction. But Halwell's legal team mounted a fierce defense, determined to shift blame and reshape the narrative. They painted Halwell as a respected educator whose reputation had been destroyed by a troubled and unstable student. They portrayed Avery as emotionally fragile, suggesting he had fabricated parts of the affair in a desperate attempt to gain attention. They claimed Halwell had only tried to help Avery, that any messages could be taken out of context, and that the physical evidence was circumstantial. It was a tactic designed to plant doubt, especially among jurors unfamiliar with the dynamics of power, coercion, and identity. But the prosecution came prepared. They played audio recordings recovered from the flash drive, including one where Halwell clearly threatened Avery. They presented screenshots of emails and texts that outlined the progression of the relationship. They brought in digital forensics experts to testify how files had been intentionally deleted and scrubbed from Avery's laptop and cloud accounts. Most powerful of all were the pages from Avery's journal, which revealed not just facts, but feelings, the slow erosion of his self-worth, the fear he lived with, and the documentation of every encounter with Halwell in painful detail. Testimony from Avery's friends, professors, and family members built a clear picture. This wasn't a case of confusion or misinterpretation. This was a relationship built on secrecy, manipulation, and imbalance. It was a slow, deliberate process of grooming, followed by emotional control, and finally, a brutal attempt to silence the truth. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just under 2 days. They returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. Halwell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion as the verdict was read. But across the courtroom, Avery's mother wept quietly, holding her son's photo in her hands. For her and many others, justice had been served, but healing was still far away. The aftermath left a lasting mark on Briarwood College. Multiple faculty members were investigated and quietly resigned. The administration launched a long overdue review of its policies, but critics said the changes were cosmetic. The truth was that Briarwood, like many institutions, had failed to protect one of its most vulnerable students. In Avery's memory, his parents launched a foundation aimed at supporting LGBTQ+ youth and promoting safer academic environments. They also established a scholarship fund for aspiring investigative journalists. Across the country, Avery's story became a flashpoint in conversations about academic abuse, consent, and how institutions handle student-teacher relationships. Students who had once passed Avery in the hallway now remembered him not just as a victim, but as a young man who dared to speak up. His name became a symbol, printed on protest signs, whispered in student groups, and etched into the conscience of a college that would never be the same. In life, Avery had searched for truth. In death, he forced the world to confront it.